Hi YouTube, it's Kathy, and this is my weekly entertainment wrap-up for October 14th to 20th. This week I read 3 books and DNF'd a 4th, I watched 2 shows, and I listened to 2 books. The book I DNF'd this week was the short story The Body by Stephen King. I had been reading this for the Books in the Freezer readathon, but King kind of lost me when we had a whole chapter where the protagonist told us this story that he wrote in college, which has nothing to do with the plot of this story. This story is about a group of kids going on a trek to see a corpse. It is also the basis for the movie Stand By Me, which I don't think I've ever seen, but last weekend Will Wheaton walked right by the table where I was selling swords, so at least I've seen him in 3 dimensions. I kind of wanted to sell him a claymore, but didn't want to start a nerd riot by pointing out that he was there. This week I read Tokyo Ghoul Volume 3 by Sue Ishida. This is a manga about a human who gets into an accident and winds up part ghoul, fearsome creatures who prey on humans. Being the 3rd in the series, there's not much I can say about this volume that wouldn't be a spoiler, but I do want to discuss something related. My ability to retain what happened in previous volumes doesn't seem to be super strong, so I end up confused if people are referenced just by name and not actually shown on the page. Does anyone else feel this way about serialized stories? The next story I finished was The Traveling Cat Chronicles by Hiro Arikawa. This book was sent to me by the publisher for an honest review, although the first time they sent it I received a torn, empty package. Thanks, Canada Post. This book comes out on Tuesday and follows the relationship between a man and a cat who lives outside his apartment building. Due to a turn of events, the cat ends up living with the man until 5 years later when he needs to find a new home for it. The man and cat go on trips together to various old friends of the man looking for the right fit, and we learn a lot about the man's past. I'm not gonna lie, this is the 2nd book about a cat that has made me cry. The first book was Dewey, about a real cat who lived in the public library in Spencer, Iowa. The story is written and translated in such a way that you can tell when Nana, the cat, is speaking without the use of quotation marks, which are reserved for human speech. The adventures are heartwarming, and if you are a cat person, this is a must-read book. The last book I read this week was The Fearsome Foursome by Amicus Arcane. This is a book of 4 short stories about the titular fearsome foursome who find themselves locked in the haunted mansion. These 4 have a club where they trade scary stories, but on this night, the librarian tells stories about them. This is a middle grade book, and as such it kept the gore in check, but it was a fun read nonetheless. I'm also just a fan of Disney's Haunted Mansion, so it was fun to revisit it in this way. One of the shows I watched this week was Riverdale, because I'm trying to rewatch the first 2 seasons before talking about it this weekend at Geek Girl Con. I'm nearing the end of the first season, but I also have the Spooktacular readathon this week, so I don't know if I'm going to finish a complete rewatch in this time. Especially because I sort of need to finish all my books before I leave on Thursday. Regardless, the art and cinematography direction in this show makes for a beautiful watching experience. And the cast is full of quips, so I'm sure the panel will have lots to talk about. As for Survivor, we finished watching season 10 and stayed current on season 37. I was unsurprised by the winner of season 10, but definitely surprised as to how the last immunity challenge went down. I also keep hearing little tidbits about how the show is produced, which makes for a more interesting watching experience. This week I listened to Crazy Rich Asians by Kevin Kwan. This is a family saga following various cousins, aunties, uncles, parents, and grandparents of the richest families in Asia. Nick Young lives in New York but is traveling back to Shanghai for the wedding of his best friend, and brings his girlfriend of 2 years along. She doesn't know his family is well off, let alone that they are the 1% of the 1%. I enjoyed that the perspective shifted amongst the various characters in this story, which gave a more full picture of the extravagance and opulence, as well as more insight into the personal lives of the characters. This type of trip is one I am very unlikely to experience firsthand, so seeing the decadence this way was welcome, even if it came with a lot of entitled characters that I would want to avoid at all costs, and attitudes that normalize cheating, which is never okay unless everyone consents, in which case it's not cheating. Speaking of consent, the last book I listened to this week was The Kiss Quotient by Helen Huang. This book is about Stella, an autistic econometrician, and Michael, the mixed-race escort she hires to teach her about sex once her mother makes a plea for grandbabies. Stella has had sex before, but it was never a really pleasant experience, and she's never had a boyfriend. Michael uses escorting to pay some bills that his day job just will not cover. And although he has a policy of only seeing a client once, he agrees to help Stella with her project, fulfilling a fake-to-real relationship trope with tons of self-doubt on both sides. Stella never tells Michael about what she calls her label, and he never tells her why he needs the extra income, but they end up finding out. And each assume the other is too good for them. This was full of sexy times with clear boundaries where the proceedings would stop if someone became uncomfortable. And the best part about listening to this audiobook was how often it got dirty while I was just sitting on the bus on the way to work. and none of the other passengers knew what I was listening to. This book deals with diagnosis, sensitivities, and neurodivergent cognition, family trauma, intergenerational family issues, sex work, disappointment, guilt, and love. And the various layers of the narrative wrapped me up in the story. I thoroughly enjoyed this book. Kathy from editing here. I promised last week that I would give an update on the very end of An Absolutely Remarkable Thing because I hadn't quite finished the audiobook even though I'd read the book before. Hank's chapter was done beautifully. It is clearly his voice but not his usual speaking voice, which I really appreciated. Also this week my Nerdfighter book club had our book club discussion of An Absolutely Remarkable Thing, so that was fun. Also our hostess made Carl-shaped cookies, which of course there's no cookie cutter for those, so she had to cut them out individually, and then she also got the ingredients list for the Carl cocktail that is briefly mentioned in the book from Hank and made us those cocktails, so it was a good time. That's it for this week. If you've read, watched, or listened to any of these, let me know about it down in the comments below. On the way down to the comments, if you hit that subscribe button, that would be very nice of you. You can like and share this as you see fit, and I will see you very soon. Bye!